talking about management and engineering, I was talking with the CIO of Atlassian.
Hmm.
You're familiar with them, right?
Yep.
And we were talking about engineering performance management
Mm.
and this concept like sales has metrics and they look at like they're very metric driven now, right? With the softwares, marketing's very metric driven with cost to acquire things. And then they were looking for like where are the metrics in engineering, and I came across this company, this like new category, sort of like an emerging category called like engineering performance management. Have you heard about
Yep.
this yet?
I've seen some companies that are getting into this. Like, I think the ones that come to mind are usually like tools that write on top of GitHub, or tools that write on top of, like, Slack, and try to do a little bit of like um, I can't not say the word creepily, like,
Creepily.
kind of keep track of like everything that's going on and figure out where there's inefficiencies in the process. But I'm curious to hear some of the ones you've seen.
Yeah, so I had this guy on my show from he did Accelerator like previously. Remember that company?
Hmm.
And now he's doing this thing called Pinpoint, and very, very cool. Him and his co-founder have had this like amazing relationship for the past 19 years, which is like really cool. Like to do multiple companies with the same person over 19 years is really interesting because we're always talking about like trust and co-founders. And so I was like, this is a picture perfect relationship. So I was actually interested like after we spoke. And so I was like, hey, like let's see what it actually does after the interview. He gave me one of his co-founder, and then like he did a product demo with me so I could see it. Dude, it is so like this stuff is really cool. The I can't even describe all of it. I'm not even going to try. But all I'm saying is that that category of software is definitely something that I believe is there's going to be like 100 of those companies right right now. I think there's only like a handful, but I believe
Yep,
in the
yep, yep.
next 3 or 4 years, there's going to be like 100 of them.
I mean, it's something that I definitely struggle with, or at least as an org we struggle with a little bit, because it is a little bit harder to define um, engineering productivity, if only from the standpoint of like that. I think what's underestimated for engineering work is that it is ultimately a creative endeavor, right? Like, you can't just say like work harder or ship more lines of code, or like have a straightforward, there's an old story about I always forget. I'm terrible with names in general, and I'm going to butcher this story, but I'll give it anyway. There's a story about how, like, early on, I believe it was Apple, used to measure productivity just by straight up like lines shipped, right? It was like a very quick metric. And it's like very early in their career as like a company, and they hired this guy who knew, let's just say he knew what he was doing. He's very good at his job, and his first commit was a negative 10,000 line plus 200 line commit, and and it was just this demonstration of like, oh, actually, okay, so this guy just like actually has therefore negative productivity by our measurement, even though
Yeah.
he's effectively made this thing faster and more efficient. And so um, I think that the one way we're trying to actually to solve some of this is we're just looking at straight up things like almost developer happiness is the first thing to touch, right? Like, do developers themselves feel that they're being productive, or are they being bottlenecked on things? So, good old fashioned survey of like, name things that you were stuck on, or like where do you think we could have improvements? And that at least has helped with facilitating starting to find like, yeah, like we know that our developer setup is not optimal right now, right? But also identifying that, oh yeah, it's actually really easy for a developer to break the build on our developer virtual machine, and then find out like, okay, so if a developer breaks the build, that means every engineer in the company has to spend an hour like fixing their broken build. Well, that's a lot of time that's wasted when you add up, that's an entire engineer month at our scale,
Yeah.
and that only gets worse. And so, being cognizant of that kind of level for us, I think, is the starting point.